So Shailesh, essentially your position at Weka is to work on the spot where the intersection of artificial intelligence and storage occurs. So given that and given all the growth in AI and certainly all the changes in storage, what do you think are the biggest challenges in trying to accomplish that mission and trying to apply Weka's storage technology to AI?
Yeah, Mike, it's a great question, and in fact, I think it's a good way to characterize what I do here. So essentially, it's connecting the dots between the data science or the AI domain, right, and the infrastructure, and particularly focus on storage. That's the other domain, right? And what I mean by connecting the dots is essentially when I talk to the new personas who are essentially comprised of data scientists, chief data officers, chief analytic officers, and obviously data engineers, right, which are more responsible for the infrastructure side of things. And the previous personas, what I mentioned, they originate from line of business and so on, right? So when I talk to them, essentially I get to understand, what the challenges are for them in terms of, how they spend a lot of time doing training, how the inferencing needs to be done at lower latencies, right? How they're looking to reduce epoch times, highest images per seconds, for example, when it comes to deep learning pipelines, and so forth, right? So they are trying to look at it from an domain perspective and business perspective, right? In addition to that, obviously, there are pipeline challenges, and then there are also vertical challenges these guys talk about. Like, for example, if there is a data scientist or a chief data officer who is responsible for a use case, for example, which is driving autonomous vehicles, right? So he is basically responsible for implementing a pipeline for ADAS, what we call automated driver assistance systems. Or there could be other guys who are responsible for, implementing a genomics GATK or a cryo-EM pipeline, right? Or it could be an FSI persona. So they tend to talk in terms of challenges, what they see pertaining to their domains and pertaining to data pipelines. Now, it's my job to basically, understand those challenges and obviously feed it back into the infrastructure domain, if you will, right? And it goes multiple ways. So when it comes to infrastructure domain, it is essentially the enhancements you can do with the product, right? The right partnerships you need to form to build a solution, end-to-end solution to cater to the challenge these personas are facing. Or it could be just articulating the benefits what the infrastructure provides to these new personas in their language or their lingo, right? So that's what my job essentially is, bridging the gap, and then also, as I said, there's also, in addition to understanding the challenges, it's also about articulating the benefits and the opportunity. For example, obviously, if there is a faster access to data, or a storage layer which can provide a higher throughput, what that means to a data scientist is reduce epoch times, right? He can take his DNN a lot more faster to market. He can basically directly make an impact to his top line and bottom line, right? So essentially, that's what my role is, and that's how I go about, bridging that gap or connecting those dots, what I talked about.
Well, and speaking in that general direction, I mean, obviously there's a lot of different storage architectures out there. You got DAS, you got centralized storage arrays, obviously software-defined and scale-out solutions. And I think as most people understand or guess, in most cases, a lot of AI requires very large data sets and oftentimes multiple versions of those data sets so you can look at different kind of scenarios. Obviously, you guys are very, very focused in this area. I know what you're doing in the autonomous vehicle space, but are there other types of AI problems that you think scale-out architectures, are a real standout, advantage, say, compared to centralized arrays or DAS or other approaches?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at AI and particularly deep learning is where most of the action is. where the primarily inflection point is this new compute layer comprised of what I tend to call accelerated computing, right? I mean, it could be with GPUs, it could be with FPGAs, it could be with accelerators, right? So this compute layer is extremely parallel. It's very complex, right? So we are talking about 5,000 cores in a GPU, in a standard GPU, to about 400,000 cores in a specialized accelerator. For example, we've been talking to a company called Cerebras. Right now, again, I don't know if you can quote the company or not, Mike, right? But Cerebras, for example, have an accelerator which comprises of 400,000 cores. So that's the kind of parallelism you see in the compute layer. So the traditional storage solutions, the way they were designed, they were architected and deployed, they fall short, right? So you need to think about the storage solutions very differently, right? Because these compute layers, they depend typically, not typically, to a great extent, they depend on the access to the data sets, right? And if that data sets are not accessible in the right time frame, then all of this accelerated compute is underutilized, okay? So, if you look at, for example, the traditional solutions, right? DAS is good when it comes to a single storage node and small deployments, right? When it comes to really scalable data sets, DAS obviously falls short, right? SAN is also a similar story, very high in performance, right? But when it comes to shareability, they are extremely poor. For example, we have a lot of customers who have migrated from a really high performance SAN to a file system, because what happens is they tend to use this 8 or 10 hosts who are talking to this SAN, and then each of these hosts copies that data 8 or 10 times. So now suddenly you have those 8 or 10 copies of that same data set. Obviously very poor utilization, okay, and that also results into a lot of silos. So that's SAN. If you look at NAS, NAS provides the shareability, but NAS falls short in terms of performance and throughput, right? And that's to a large extent also because of the protocols. For example, NFS was not designed for this kind of high performance workloads, right? NFS at the most, you can get about 1.5 to 2 gigabytes of throughput, is extremely, falls short when it comes to this new architecture. Similarly, when you look at object stores, for example, they're good in terms of scalability, but they are extremely poor when it comes to performance. And then, when it comes to ease of use as well, because they totally use different set of protocols, right? You got to rewrite your applications for REST, APIs, and so on and so forth, right? So these are all the challenges with the existing storage architectures. What we do at Weka is obviously provide an scale out storage, but essentially we provide, a better shareability than a NAS environment. We provide highest performance than the highest performing SAN, and we can provide highest durability than an object store. And not to mention the scale, right? The scale we can provide is extremely large, goes almost in terms of exabytes. Okay, and plus we can also extend our file namespace over an object capacity tier. That's yet another behavior. So as you can see, the scale out file systems, and particularly Weka, has an unique advantage when it comes to this new kind of cloud native workloads, which are looking for performance at scale.
Well, I think as you hit it, that parallelism,
Yeah.
especially to the thousands of nodes, becomes critical. I mean, I could see with the centralized system, what you're basically doing is you're turning your network into the real bottleneck, right? Whereas, having the storage out there, but being able to manage it all as one piece, solves a lot of problems for people that are into that sort of solution. So it makes
Absolutely. And then a couple other things I forgot to mention was obviously what scale out file systems provide is, they provide the best TCO now, right? Because, you're not building or buying this high performance arrays, right? You are able to leverage flash and capacity tier based out of hard disk drive very efficiently, okay, and economically. And then, as we are able to cater to the whole pipeline on the same storage substrate, whether you're running it on premise or in the public cloud, that's yet another benefit, and that eliminates, the silos which are typically observed with these other storage architectures.
Very true. Very true. So one of the areas, and I've done some consulting work for a few people in this area. So if you look at healthcare, AI is really taken off. Radiometry is one area where we see where there's been a lot of growth. Looking at slides and outcomes and trying to find out, hey, is there a way I can use AI to detect cancer earlier, things like that. But it's certainly not the only area where AI has been applied in healthcare. Can you talk about some of the things you guys have done and with scaled storage and in the healthcare field?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Right. So healthcare is one of the verticals where you see, AI being applied, right, and primarily for clinical diagnostics or anomaly detection, right. So, kind of providing and what we call augmented intelligence for radiologists, for example, right. So that's one use case where you see, and essentially what that is, the AI algorithms, they can detect anomalies in a PACS or an EMR picture a lot better than a human being, right? So those are some of the use cases where we see. In fact, we are working with with NVIDIA and one of our channel partners for a reference architecture involving Clara SDK, right? So Clara is an SDK which NVIDIA has uh, primarily owns, okay, and Clara SDK essentially democratizes the use of AI for particularly detecting, anomalies with PACS pictures, right? So that could be one use case. The second use case, which is kind of related to healthcare, but it's within a slightly an extended vertical, which we call life sciences, which is also where we are seeing a lot of traction for Weka. We recently won a big deal, which was Genomics England in UK, displacing one of the traditional storage vendor. And there for life sciences, what we see is again, AI being applied for accelerating the traditional pipelines. Like for example, GATK used to be is a toolkit which is pretty popular for what we call next generation sequencing, right? Now there are companies like Parabricks, which in fact NVIDIA just recently bought that. It's a small startup. And what Parabricks does is it accelerates GATK for GPU enabled compute, okay? So, and again, with that, it brings in the same challenges what I was outlining in terms of parallelism, for the need for parallelism, right? That's yet one other use case with life sciences. There's also another use case around cryo EM data pipelines. Okay, so a lot of AI being applied for healthcare and life sciences, and certainly Weka has been winning quite a few marquee customers for that particular verticals and use cases.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I would imagine that would be a huge area for you guys.
Yeah.
And I've talked with a lot of different vendors in this space, and you look at some of the use cases that are held out there. It's that, hey, they buy a huge storage system, they buy tons of GPUs from NVIDIA, and they got a $20 or $30 million system, which a few guys can afford, but most people can't. So certainly being able to do it on different sorts of hardware, which you enable, makes life a lot easier. I think for a lot of people to implement something that's both affordable and yet effective. And kind of along those lines, one of the big hits that I know software-defined storage has historically gotten, again, primarily from the array guys, is that you have to put the solution together yourself, right? And you have to buy the hardware in one hand, you got to buy the software in another hand, you got to integrate it all together, and then you have to figure out when it breaks, who do I call, and which of those companies do I call? It seems to me that some of that resistance has decreased over the past few years. Have you guys seen that to be the case, and what do you think is one of the big factors driving that? The fact that people are more amenable to a solution like that, where it's not perhaps just straight out of the box.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. So essentially, I mean, one of the reasons why people go after scale out file solutions is because of the flexibility it provides, right? So what that means is put together best of breed solutions, right? You're not tied to a certain particular vendor, right? You can get the best of the the stack, right? The best storage servers, the best networking, the best file system, and so on. But the flip side of that is also, as you mentioned, as a result of that, what happens is, they end up trying to put these things together, right? So what we have seen as a rising trend, and what we do particularly with the solution framework, what we have put out called WekaAI, is what we do is we provide a blueprint for the customer. So though this is a software, scale out, software defined and scale out file system, what we do is we exactly provide a blueprint to the customer as to as to how you would put the whole solution stack together, depending on the best ecosystem or the best of breed partners, right? So Veka AI, for example, is a framework where we work with our chosen ecosystem partners, again, the best of breed ecosystem partners, and we provide a blueprint to the customer, right, where he can consume this in a very easy form in small, medium, and large bundles. Okay. That kind of, that's very essential when you're talking about democratizing, the infrastructure for this particular new cases, right? And in fact, with WekaAI, we even go a step further. So obviously, you got to help the end customers around the storage, but we also go a step further in providing the entire stack, which comprises of, again, best practices for the accelerated compute. It could be around, the orchestration layer, which could be based on Kubernetes, right? The workflow managers on top, which allow you to do, test, feature engineering. It allows you to do hyperparameter optimization and inference, right? So, it becomes extremely easy for these new personas to consume this solution stack, and that way they can focus more on the business problems or the domain problems they're trying to solve, rather than worrying about the infrastructure challenges, right? And that's how we help. And also from a support perspective, right, the way this is taken to market of our channel partners or the OEMs. So it is essentially a single throat to choke model, right? So you're not dealing, I mean, they are the ones who would put this blueprint. They'll be the ones who will be putting all of this together and be responsible for the level 1 support or level 2 support as appropriate, right? So that becomes, that's the consumption model for WekaAI particularly. And that makes it a lot more easy from a consumption perspective.
Very nice. Yeah, it sounds too, and tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that your guys' approach to using reference architecture is a lot more open than the old approach, which used to be, hey, here's my qualified vendor list, pick guys off of here and put it together. But it sounds like you're really saying, here's what you want to do to get a best in breed, best performance approach. And
yeah,
it's less about who you're using as much as, and maybe more about how you're using it and to most effective.
that's right. Yeah. So our reference architectures go beyond, right? And they actually show you some proof points. For example, we also do some benchmarking around, the best of breed solutions, what we put together, right? So it's not just, hey, this is a vendor list and go figure out what you want to do, right? So that's making it a lot more easier to consume.
Very good, very good. So, obviously you guys have been around for a while. I think it's been about 6 years, correct? I think you're founded in 2014, if I remember correctly. So, and you've gotten a lot of growth over that time. What do you kind of see as the big challenges for the next couple of years to really continue growing your presence in the market?
Yeah, so doing file systems and really doing enterprise file systems, which are very different, takes a lot of time. So yes, we started in 2014. We actually had a GA product in 2017, around that time frame. Okay, so we've been in the marketplace from a go-to-market perspective for last couple years. Okay, and we have seen a tremendous success with the product, right? So if you recently saw a press release, we have almost had 600% revenue growth in the last financial year. 500% growth just in the AI, ML, and HPC segment. Okay, where we are able to cater to new use cases around autonomous driving, genomics, and FSI, right? At the same time, we also embarked on some great OEM partnerships. We have partnerships with pretty much all the large OEMs. Uh, Obviously, with a GPU compute and with CPU as well. Okay, and we also expanded our channel partnerships by almost by 100%, right? And at the product level, we are really the only enterprise, storage product or file system which can provide you exascale capacity, and which can do, cater to high performance computing markets. It can cater to the AI ML use cases, and it can cater to what we call HPDA use cases, right? High performance data analytics, right? And there is really a convergence happening with these three markets, and we are in a very unique position, unlike other parallel file systems, right? To be able to cater to this newborn convergence. Okay, so and also, of course, on a product level, we can provide the capability of having you can deploy it on-prem, or you can deploy it in public cloud. We have an AWS offering as well, and you can provide hybrid cloud. You can provide edge to core to cloud capabilities. Edge, when I say edge, I'm talking about edge aggregation. Okay, where think of autonomous vehicles coming to a parking lot, and then there is an edge aggregation device which can then upload that data into a core and public cloud. So a lot of flexibility, lot of functionality built into the product. And when you ask me about the challenge, right, going forward with this kind of success, the challenge is always in terms of how do you scale your business, right? And that's obviously one of the challenges. The other challenge is how can we evangelize ourselves? How do more people know about it? That, hey guys, there is really and perfect solution for these use cases, which provides you the best performance at scale, providing you the best TCO capabilities, unlike the traditional storage vendors. So it's really about spreading the word, right? And the reason why we are talking is one of these reasons, right? Being able to tell the market or evangelize to the market that what our value proposition is, and so on, right? So those are some of the the successes what we have seen, and some of the challenges.
Well, it sounds like you guys are well positioned. I mean, obviously for hardware storage vendors, the cloud has been a bit of a conundrum, right? Do you embrace it, knowing that it's going to eat into your revenue? Do you build something work both ways, or do you hope it goes away? And it sounds like for you guys, it really doesn't impact your business particularly. It gives you a lot of opportunity to go either way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So we complement the public cloud, right? And we use the public cloud for extending capacity. We use it for test and dev purposes. We leverage the cloud for economies of scale. For example, you can keep your data on premise, right? And leverage the cloud for, say, for example, GPU compute, right? So there are several use cases. And again, we have very powerful capabilities to be able to do things like cloud bursting and so on, right? And also other thing is edge is now becoming big. There's a lot of inflection of AI and the edge, right? So we are able to now also cater to the edge, right? So you would see a lot of messaging around edge to core to cloud pipelines, and how we are able to successfully cater to those.